we see which are extremely high. I've been a complainant in that, to that effect, that the interest rates that we find ourselves in, 34%, you cannot borrow and develop a country. So we need to find a middle way between fiscal policy and monetary policy. And I think that, let's see what Mr. Mpunga can do. We are available to offer critique if he does not yield to what the country should be. Now is the time for all of us to sit down, put our heads together, and find a middle way between fiscal policy and monetary policy. You cannot expect that instead of lending money to the business community, the banks should be playing float with the money in the terms of treasury bills. Right now, the highest yielding instruments in the country is not you investing in Legana, but it's you taking your money and placing it on fixed deposits or treasury bills. And you cannot develop a country with a monetary policy that does not push the idea.
So we've gotten it all wrong from what you're explaining.
Of course. I think that it starts at that. If you look at the Western world, even with the pandemic, they are reducing their interest rates. But for us, it's very, very high interest rates. The president made an announcement that there was 10 billion kwacha to support enterprise. But you know who are the major beneficiaries? It's the banks. If you owe a bank, say 500,000 kwacha, at the interest of 34%, they go to the central bank and collect that 500,000 kwacha from that fund which was meant for enterprises, and they cover themselves, and then they say that they will pass on a reduced interest. The net effect is there's no money. The idea that the president had to put more liquidity into business, the middlemen who are the commercial banks, and not only commercial banks that are locally based, but international commercial banks have been bailed out. Obviously, they are all registered at Pakra here in Long Acres. But it's very surprising that there's not one business person or business woman in this country who will stand up and say, "Thank you, Mr. President. I have received an extra 500,000 from the 10 billion kwacha." I think that Minister of Finance and the central bank must sit together and decide as to what they want to do. It cannot always be a program for benefiting commercial banks. Whether it's money from World Bank, the commercial banks hold those floats for years, they never disperse. You can talk about irrigation funds. So I think that we really need to find a way forward in pushing money into the actual economy. People have lost a lot of things. I mean, if you really want to think about those people who were importing, they've lost everything. My friends, the Tamanga.com, the cross-border traders, they've lost everything. It would suffice to say, what is it that we can do to save them? And those in the business community, yes, you've reduced my interest rate. So what? Does that give me extra working capital to pay for casings or to pay for spices? The answer is no. It simply means that you are prolonging my payment period to the 5 years, but there's no extra cash for me to push into production. So these are some of the issues, and these are policy issues, monetary and fiscal policy. The two institutions.
So who's supposed to come up with those policies so that they can help the man on the ground?
I think that when cabinet says we have money, this is what we do. It's the technocrats who are supposed to sit down and say, this is how we can suggest that we use the money. But you cannot take 10 billion kwacha and push all of it to commercial banks at the expense of the intention. The intention was that people would access cash, but the net effect, and I went as far as asking my colleague, the Minister of Finance, I said, "Hey, what is this?" And the answer I got was plain. This was meant to ease the liquidity situation of commercial banks. I said, "Oh, let me shut up." Because, I mean, what can you do? I think that...
So, but people got excited that they'll have their hands on that 10 billion.
True, I was one of those who was extremely excited. I thought that I would get extra money to put up a piggery. But the truth is that you got your existing loans. The only relief you got was the interest was reduced from 34 to 17%. The point is, even if it's reduced, you still don't have money to pay even that 17%. It would have been better to take that money and put in production. I walk to the bank and I say, well, we have restructured your existing loan, but on top of that, since you're a good customer, you've been paying, we're giving you an extra 1 million kwacha for your working capital. That would have brought in extra activities, more employment. The whole purpose of that money has been usurped by the commercial banks through the central bank. And you see, we can hang on to monetary policies and theories of economics, but at a certain point we have to be practical as a nation.
Okay, now going back to the earlier question, the earlier issue about the firing of the governor. The move has been criticized by certain stakeholders, both locally and internationally, including the IMF. Now, having served as finance minister under the MMD regime, do you think the criteria used to select a central governor was followed?
I have to say that it's a preserve of the appointing authority. I know when I was moved from Minister of Finance, I got calls from Washington. They were quite content with what I was doing. What can we do? I said, excuse me, I'm a politician. Some even suggested, you want a job? I said, no, I'm a Zambian. I've been moved to another place to work. And I can assure you that Dr. Kariaja is a professional. We will still see him in other capacities. When you are removed from your job, it doesn't mean that your service to your nation is terminated. And it would be wrong to think that a profession in the capacity of Dr. Kariaja's service is ended. Maybe there's something for him. And maybe also, some of us have had no public jobs for over 20 years. We're still serving. It's time. It doesn't matter whether it's... there was a former bank governor there. And Dr. Kariaja was brought in by Arabi. And he has continued to serve. There have been countless ministers. So when people move, they probably have... the appointing authority probably has a way of rearranging the management of the economy. So what we can do as nationals is not to say, no, the IMF is criticizing. The IMF itself is responsible for where we are. Why aren't we getting relief under the facilities that have been put up for COVID as a country? So when you have me in a job and you are not being helped, why didn't they help our governor when he was there through the Minister of Finance so that the monetary policy could be eased so that people can see development and say, yes, our governor is working together with the Minister of Finance, because governor's side is just monetary policy. The fiscal side is what has to be supported by the monetary policy. So I actually don't think that people like Mboweni in South Africa, they fire governors every now and then. So why would you even give him the platform? I'm even shocked that we Zambians, I think, do you even give him the platform that I saw him being given on ZNBC, on your station, talking about Minister of Finance from South Africa? Would my Minister of Finance from Zambia get that platform in South Africa? Never. But we Zambians, sometimes I wonder what our orientation is.
Are we a petty people or what?
I think that we are just good people. We are just good people. You know, having been home to the liberation struggle, we don't need our children to be lecturing to us. And I think that some of our brothers in the region, they should respect us.
And there's some Zambians who didn't even see anything wrong with Tito Mbowemi's move, commenting on a sovereign country like Zambia. Some people even
honestly,
say, yes,
I would comment and say that the behavior of South Africans in South African Parliament is unpalatable to SADC, is unpalatable to the world. Okay? I would also comment and say that maybe this current administration should have allowed the former president to finish, because it was messy. It was antagonizing to just remove a sitting president. But those are their procedures. We also have views on South Africa, but we choose to have the SADC spirit. We can't comment on how Zimbabwe is removing their minister, Angola is removing their minister. It's out of diplomatic etiquette. I think that President Ramaphosa has done the correct thing. And with Zambians, well, this is a dead issue. It's under the bridge. Let's move on.
Now, people are wondering, does the change at the central bank jeopardize our relationship with stakeholders like IMF and the World Bank in any way?
Since when? The IMF is, we are members of the IMF, 182 members of member states. It has nothing to do with individuals. I said, when I left the Minister of Finance, I too had supporters who were surprised. But life continued. When Dr. Katere came in, life continued. Everyone has to have their own management styles, their own relationships, and it's a professional relationship. It's not about individuals. And look, I think that we need to move on to substantive issues, other than that, the tenure and the sustenance of 2 or 3 individuals in our republic. I don't think that is right. I have a lot of respect for Dr. Kariane. I know him personally from the university. These were some of our seniors. So I have nothing to say, but except to say that he's a professional, and so is Mr. Mvunga. Allow him to settle down and show us what he can do. That's when we can comment.
Now the decision taken by the president brought to the fore a number of issues, including the printing of money, which some stakeholders believe led to the firing of Dr. Galera, being put for refusing to do that. Do you think is there any truth in that?
I don't know. Because Zambia is a Kachepa community. You wake up one morning, you say something else, that becomes the news. And it's so unfortunate, because the point is, why not bring Dr. Galera himself on air? He's in Zambia, he's in Makeni, so please find him, talk to him. That would be the fair way to do it, than to continue speculating this one. No, I think that we have to be a bit more mature as a nation.
Now, the president issued a statement that he's taking control of the economy. So, what does that imply with the poor state of our economy, where we find ourselves in such kind of issues?
I mean, when he says he wants to take control of the economy, and he's in Zambia, have you interviewed him? Because if he made that announcement, you as members of the Fourth Estate, you should be able to call his public relations officer and say, this statement has certain information which we don't have. When he says he wants to take control of the economy, I think that maybe he has a plan in how we are going to get out of this COVID situation. I've seen the president in the villages trying to motivate people to work hard. And I think that as a nation, we have been, this COVID thing, if it's not an eye-opener, then we will continue to live in a world where we don't see. Because we're dependent solely on the outside world, whether it is for medicine, whether it is for education, whether it is for supplies to the mines, supplies to our shops, carrots from South Africa, oranges from South Africa, some climate. If this COVID issue and pandemic is not an eye-opener, then as a nation we will never develop. What I've realized lately is that, you see, COVID is an equalizer. There were those of us who would fly out for medication. Now we can't. We have our UTH. So as a nation, we need to invest more in our local facilities. As a nation, we need to motivate each other to work hard. Are you telling me that nachos can't grow in Chiengi? Are you telling me that apples can't grow in Myombe? We have temperate and savanna type climate. In Zambia, everything can grow, from cashew nuts to blueberries just here in Chisamba. We're exporting blueberries from here, strawberries, and therefore we need to understand that depending on the outside world will not save us. As we're talking right now, our brothers and sisters from the Congo were in the villages collecting beans. Literally going, the entire northern province was swept in 1 month of every grain of beans. And luckily some chiefs in Bara said a meda was only going to cost, not going to cost less than 50 kwacha. Can you imagine if each family had a ton of beans? That's 50,000 kwacha. Would we need to depend on a social cash transfer? No. I think that we need to reorient ourselves towards development, creating wealth in households. And how do we do it? It's our fingers, it's our soil, it's ourselves. We need to motivate each other that we shouldn't be importing fish from China. We can grow fish in Zambia, and I think that it has been shown that it is possible. If you can grow blueberries, you can grow fish, you can do anything in this country. We may not be able just yet to make casings for sausages, but these are some of the activities which we still have gaps. If we depend on outside world for medication, we should now realize that we can do it locally. What is so impossible for us to have the radiation authority authorize the manufacture of isotopes? What is so impossible for us to import equipment that we do like to go outside to get checked on, to have it stationed here? You find that really we are missing the opportunity. So when the president says he wants to take control, I pray and hope that he's thinking the way I'm thinking, that we need to go local. And if we go local, yes, that is taking control of the economy.
All right, now let's look at the commitment to fight corruption under this regime. It has been heavily criticized by a lot of stakeholders who feel this has just been a window dressing exercise. What is ZD's position on the fight against graft in Zambia?
In our manifesto, we said that the root cause of corruption is centralization, over-centralization of government. When everything happens in Lusaka, I was watching yesterday at Prime Time ZNBC that dredgers were imported a year ago, and they're still in Lusaka because the central government has not raised 700,000 kwacha to distribute them. In our model of development as FDT, that can't happen, because that ordering of dredgers by, say, Western Province District, say Lukulu, would actually take place in Lukulu. Lukulu would be the ones issuing the tender and evaluating that tender and importing the dredgers. If it was owned, if the process was owned by the district, there is absolutely no way you can have dredgers marooned in Lusaka for 1 year, because the owners in Lukulu would say, where is our dredger? Now, because we think that our people in the periphery don't have capacity, which is really misplaced, because we think that our people don't have capacity, then we tend to do things for them. This is like in a home. If every day you wake up, you make the bed for your child, the child will be 20 years old and they will not know how to make a bed. If in your home you can't teach your children how to sweep the house, when they go to their homes, they will not know how to sweep their houses. So, in our development model as FDD, we said and we have emphasized that decentralization of budgeting to the district is what would eliminate corruption. Because if in Lukulu they know that they have 20 billion kwacha for buying dredgers, and you float tenders, and you don't deliver dredgers for 1 year, they will ask you. It is transparent. So this idea that everything happens at the ministry, it's only the Minister of Works and Supply who must issue tenders, it's only public procurement, and it's a thing which you can't.
Is it a system that promotes corruption?
Yes, over-centralization of government anywhere in the world promotes corruption. You've just seen in the States in their purchases of PEPs, when it was the governors on their own in their areas, it was clear. When it was taken to the federal government, you heard murmurs of, hey, it's opaque, it's not clear. And this is a problem, because when you say Minister of Finance and you are in Kaputa, what is Minister of Finance? It's just a building. In Kaputa, if you say the district commissioner has chewed the money, it will be clear. Is it no wonder that this corruption issue is only endemic in Lusaka? You don't hear that in Chipata or in Mugugudu, people have embezzled money. The money is here. So the solution is, let's decentralize. Let us decentralize the Auditor General's department to the districts. Let us decentralize the Anti-Corruption Commission to the districts. Let us decentralize budgeting and control of national resources to the district. That's the only way we can tackle corruption. Otherwise, this complaint, it has been there for years, that the anti-corruption can't function. And why do we say that? Because when I say you are corrupt, I want you to be convicted. I don't want you to say, to have your way and say, no, look, these are the facts. Accusation in our country is synonymous with guilt. And the only way we can cut that is to open up and take these issues to the people. But however, I also tend to think that the operations of the Anti-Corruption Commission are marred in probably rushing to investigate, to make announcements. They should do their work, finalize it, and make announcements when we have a tight case, so that we stop looking at them that they're ineffective, they can't work. I mean, they have to secure some convictions for us to have some good faith in them. But it appears each time there are accusations, there are acquittals. So either the department is inept, or they simply don't have good investigators.
So a lot of people are crying and they're saying they're incompetent and it should be just disbanded. Well, what's your take on that?
I think that the Anti-Corruption Commission was created a long time ago to be able to provide checks and balances to government. And unfortunately, it hasn't grown beyond what it was 25, 30 years ago. And that's why investigations on embezzlements, and I mean, they have done some acquittals in the past. I think you can recall that they have had some convictions in the past, and they have had some acquittals in the past. But it requires a combination of investigators to be able to assist them. As they are in their current form, we are going to continue to decry the fact that they can't deliver justice to the people of Zambia.
Now, the president recently issued a very strong statement, perceived by many as a direct attack on the Anti-Corruption Commission, when he said corruption fight is anchored in politics and meant to influence regime change. And of course, this followed the acquittal of Health Minister Dr. Chitalu Chilufya. Don't you think the president influenced the decision?
No, I don't think so. I mean, if you're a professional soldier and you're in the bush, they should produce evidence, that's all. I think that the point that I'm making here is that corruption becomes endemic when the handling of tenders is centralized in the hands of the few. And the solution to that is to decentralize. When this country heeds our advice that we need to go for district budgeting, we have over 103 districts. Each district must have its own budget and its own team in the districts dealing with procurement and implementation of projects. When we move to that, then I can tell you there will be no need for the anti-corruption to be in SAC. Because for me, in place of anti-corruption, I want a very, very strong Auditor General's Department. I don't want the Auditor General's Department, which gives me history after 2 years. I want the Auditor General's Department in each and every district, and a controlling officer in each district whom we can subvert money to and say, here is 20 billion for Namshakeni. Spend it. And they call people there, the councillors, the MPs, the local people, the headmen, the chiefs, and say, what are we building? Are we building a secondary school? And everybody looks at what they are doing. We did the experiment with this during our time. And funds from the World Bank, where we would allocate, say, 2 million kwacha to Kalingalinga. Not a kwacha was embezzled, because you had local people there managing the funds, and they knew who is working to unclog the drains. And there's the MP, the councillors, the church leaders. We had a good time. So the model of decentralization works. And it works in what way? It shows tangible results and eliminates the long fingers. Because everybody is scared that I'm being watched. There's 2 billion kwacha here. And the family of the community knows that this money is for Cheston Clinic. If we don't produce Cheston Clinic or Kalikiliki police post, then we are done. And people are very, very careful at local level. It's us here at the center. Because we know that by the time the money gets, by the time people hear the dredgers were bought, we don't even know how much. You need to empower the local people to do these jobs and facilitate, help them to do the documentation, train them, give them capacity, and we'll see phenomenal development.
So, Madam, now if I'm following you closely, from what you're saying, without decentralization, then the fight against corruption is an exercise in futility.
That's exactly what I'm saying, that the root cause of corruption in our nation and in Africa is because of over-centralization of government. And this is not just about black governments. It is a historical issue from the colonial government. There was over-centralization of authority in London. You know that even the Queen's crown has our emerald on the crown. All resources were taken from the colonies to the center in Europe. And when we got independence as Africans, we just interposed our authority on an existing opaque system which was over-centralized, meant to save the authorities in Europe. And unless we change our mode of government, we are still going to call government after government corrupt. It's actually now a theme which is meant as a tool for change of government. All you need to say is that this government is corrupt, and the next day you be gone.
This is the Hot Seat, and of course we're live on Kwitu and Hot FM. Kwitu FM is on 93.3, and of course it's a special program. We're talking to Ms. Nawakwi, the FDD leader. And of course, as we proceed, a very interesting issue here to do with UPND leader Hakainde Hichilema, who recently broke his silence on the accusation that he benefited heavily from the privatization of mines. And you're among the people he has called out to explain what exactly transpired. What role did you play in the privatization of the mines?
No, thank you very much for that question. I think that he didn't explain. Time and again, people ask Hakainde Hichilema how he became rich. And that is the question. Time and again, people ask him, Mr. Hakainde, Mr. Hichilema, how did you become a billionaire? And he gets so upset about that question. What I noticed from his clip is he says, at the time of privatization, MMD was the one in government. I was young, he says. And how could I, at my age of 29, sell mines? I want to tell the nation that if he was 29, I was a 30, and I was Minister of Finance. I was Minister of Agriculture, I would deal with the 2 ministries. Now, you see, he says he was young. I want to say from the outset, this is why government has created the Katombora Reformatory for young criminals. It is not because you are young that you cannot be a criminal, but Katombora Reformatory is there for people who are young. So the story of him being young is not there. I want to say that the behavior of Hakainde Hichilema is equivalent to Nebo in the Bible. And I draw him to 1 Samuel chapter 25, verse 1 to 42. The story of Nebo and David. Nebo is, in the Bible, is a very rich man, but he lacks wisdom, he's self-conceited, he doesn't respect anyone, he doesn't create any relationships. When he opened his statement on the air at some radio station, one would expect that at this point of development where we are and the age, we need to create developments. If he has been lucky not to be booked by the Anti-Corruption Commission, he should just keep quiet, because he should say he's lucky. As the former Minister of Agriculture, you asked him for my role. We wanted to restructure Lima Bank, and we gave Grant Thornton the opportunity to advise government on receivership. Mind you, on receivership. They went ahead and did a liquidation of Lima Bank. Now, I just want Hakainde to answer one question. Is he able to produce the bid and the price which gave him the house in Sevo Road where he's been residing until we moved to Mukamuya in Lusaka East? This is a Lima Bank house. Under our current laws, and even previous laws, that is a theft and that's corruption. You cannot give a public officer, and you are not a public officer just because you are in government. He was an advisor to government. So to the extent that Grant Thornton was a receiver for Lima Bank, and Hakainde alienates a house to himself, that is a theft. He's lucky if he hasn't gone to Katombora. He's lucky if the law hasn't visited him. Hakainde Hichilema, under my watch as Minister of Finance, we were selling Intercontinental Hotel in Livingstone. And the foreigners were there, he brought them as an advisor. And when they had stood up, I said, Mr. Hichilema, do you think this 6 million is a fair price for the government? He's a professional, he's young, and it's not wrong to trust a young mind. You think that these are Zambians, as later on as Benza put it, let us use our fellow Zambians to advise. You think that this is a Zambian who has the interest of the country at heart. His answer was, yes, Madam Minister. The price of $6 million for Intercontinental Hotel in Livingstone is a fair price. I mean, he says I was sleeping. Thieves come when you are sleeping. That's why they break in, they come with guns. However, the very next day, when we had finished the transaction on the Intercontinental Hotel and it had moved to be Southern Sun, Mr. Hichilema became the chairperson of the new owners. Isn't that a conflict of interest? And there are further stories. You talk of Ramco's receivership. There were issues. These are the issues that people want him to clarify. At what point did he become a millionaire and even start to have money in foreign accounts?
Explain more on when it comes to Intercontinental Hotel in the Southern Province. So when he said the 6 million is okay, so he thought it was right. So what was wrong with that?
There was nothing wrong with it. What is wrong is that the very next day, he becomes part and parcel of the people who have bought the asset. He didn't declare that he would have an interest.
What was a deep role?
Look, that's the point I make, that he's lucky if he hasn't been probed. So he shouldn't start to verify others and say Edith Nawakwi was sleeping. I mean, if we trusted him to do these jobs as a Zambian, doesn't mean we were all shocked and surprised that you could actually use both sides and jump this side and that side. I think that's conflict of interest. That's not acceptable. It's something that is not acceptable. Then you come to the issue of rampos on the propaganda. They were the receivers. They should tell the public and say, this is what we did, this is how we got our money, and this is where we got the millions. Prior to privatization, how much money did Mr. Hakainde have? He should say that. Prior to him moving to Sevo Road, where was he living? What is the value of that house that he got from Lima Bank? How much did he pay? Where was the bid advertised? Was it a solicited bid within their firm? All those issues become issues of explanation. But as I said, you see, if you refer to 1 Samuel 25, 1 to 42, there are people even in the Bible who have this attitude that when they have money, no one else matters. They are useless. Even Naboth said that David was not a good person. He even refused to give food to David's invoice and say, look, I can't give you food. It was just himself. And this idea of thinking that you are the most intelligent and no one else has any brains, I think that is self-defeating. Hakainde must learn that building bridges and making relationships is important in politics. Each time that they on their side open their statements to talk about me, it's either, no, Nawakwi is going to be Minister of Finance for Lungu, no, Nawakwi is now defected. I've even been appointed by websites like Koswepati. This is in their attempt to try and bring others down. And this should stop, because really, when people ask, all that is required is for the president of UPND to say, listen, I got my wealth like this, and this is where I started, and this is where I am. It's no need for him to get angry, because everyone can bring out their notebooks.
Okay, this is what he said when it comes to privatization.
The MMD government, they are there, they're still alive. Mr. Chikwande is alive. Edith Nawakwi is alive. They are all there. Me, I was 29, 30 years old. I've said this before. Remember, Mwaji was 29, 30 years old. Arishama Maini, which belongs to the government.
That's a valid question from him. I mean, were you sleeping? How was he allowed? If at all he got away with murder, who's to blame?
I think that it's very, very important to understand that he says one thing there, that he was very young, and that because he was young, he couldn't be caught. That's why I'm saying that he's lucky. If he was young, that's why we have Katombora. The question I asked him today is very clear. I am saying he got the house in Sevo Road without declaring that he was doing a misdemeanor. Now, if he hasn't been arrested by the law, he hasn't been visited, well, he should continue to say that he's Mwalikwis. Now, you can't say, I have stolen because the owners are sleeping and go boasting around. I think that's totally unacceptable. Can he actually tell us the bid price for the house in Sevo Road, how much he paid, and why they, as Grand Tonton, who were the receivers, ended up sharing the houses amongst themselves? Those are issues. So when you say he wasn't visited, because in this country, the only corrupt people are those in government. Those who are outside looting, using government means, I never followed. I think you saw that when we left as MMD, a lot of my colleagues were in jail, were sent where. Even now, the people who are being followed are those in government. Those who were advising government have never been questioned, have never been followed. And it's a very unfair situation. For example, do you think the 10 million given to Grand Tonto, 10 million US dollars, as receivers for Ramcos, if that was given to the secretary, to the treasurer, or to the minister of finance, you think they would have survived? And go 2 years later and say, no, they have money in offshore accounts which they can't explain. What type of business does Mr. Hakainde had to be able to have millions of dollars in offshore accounts which he declares? Now, this gentleman, the president of UPND, does not only end here in these assets, he goes even in the villages. There's a person in Zimba who had a stroke, I think about last year or the other year. They list a farm in Kalomo to hire the Hichilema's business. And he goes back to them and says, you people, I've paid you, but there are rent. So the rent is equivalent to the sale price of the farm. And the man had a stroke. These are some of the issues. If you look at the Naminwe area where he just arrived and grabbed land for his own grazing, how can you do that? I mean, as a commercial farmer, you can't be saying that you are a rich man, but you are grabbing communal grazing land. Because commercial farmers, as we have seen, they grow grass to feed their animals. You can't be saying you have 29 farms and yet you are grazing on communal land. A commercial farmer has to grow grass to feed their animals. We have farmers here, just here around us from ZRC. They graze in one area. You see them bedding grass to feed the animals. Have you ever seen Mr. Hichilema bedding grass? His way of raising money is to pride on the communal land. And for me, that I don't have time for. So, if someone has been lucky and the law has not visited him, one day the law will visit them, because people will go to him and say, tell us how you acquired this house, this asset, that. 27, he says he was 29. He was 29, he had no cow at the time. How then did he end up, after privatization, being such a rich man? That's the only question that people want to know. That's all. I mean, he needs to be firm enough to come to the public and say, this is my history of my wealth. I bought one animal, I got this farm, I multiplied, and this is how I've been. I was living in this house before I moved to Several Road, and how did I get this house? Explain. And you understand, Zambians are very forgiving. But please, this issue is like a boil. It continues to fester until he can squeeze it. And the only way is not to behave like Donald Trump and hide your records. The best way is to be open and tell the public, educate them. Look, we were receivers on Ramcos, this is what we did. These were the reports. And this is the creditors who still wanted to crawl back on government because the 10 million was spent like this, like this. It's simple, they're accountants. They say they're intelligent. If someone tells me that, look, Hakainde Hichilema, you failed the grade 7, I shouldn't be upset. I should, yes, I failed. Or no, I actually missed 1 year, that's all.
So now, when we look at the issue of privatization, I mean, a lot of people say, I mean, let's just bury it in the hatchet, let's forget about it and move on, because otherwise it just opens wounds, and a lot of Zambians get annoyed when you really talk about privatization. People feel the country was swindled while everybody just watched.
Oh, it wasn't that everybody watched. And those that say, let's move on, they are right. But is it me who has brought it up? Because people say, there were people like Edith Nawakwi who were at Minister of Finance. And I've said, there are assets which I saved from privatization. For example, Zamseed. Zamseed was supposed to be sold for $1. I went to a board meeting and told the Swiss shareholders, I said, here is $100. Walk out and sign the papers. And there is still Zamseed. I think the company is still here. There was the NatSave. NatSave was supposed to be sold. I realized there was only one block which people wanted to sell, and it had been built by public money. I said, no. There was National Building Society. It was provided for by the central bank, 100%. We got to restructure it when I was Minister of Finance. There was the insurance, state insurance was supposed to be auctioned off. I stopped that. I went to cabinet with a list of companies and said, these ones are the backbone of our nation. There's no way you can have a country without a state insurance. I saved that. There was DBZ. DBZ was supposed to be turned into a collection agency, agreed to and authorized by the cabinet and the World Bank. I started fighting for that to be taken off the list of companies which were going to be closed. And I know that my brother, who was then at the bank, Mr. Kalisto Madavo from Zimbabwe, who was one of the directors of the bank, he asked me, he says, my sister, what is it in this bank? It's complete, it's zero, it has no asset. I said, no, just give it to us. The loans portfolio which has been provided for by the central bank, we will collect, and we put someone there. They collected almost 12 million kwacha from money which had been borrowed and not paid. That's how you see DBZ there. So if you ask me for my account, I can only summarize in one word that the USAID then resident director wrote me a short note, said, you saved a very short but effective time. Be happy. You ran a very short but effective race, but be happy that you are still young. And that's very important, that at least I can say I did that. And for those that I have mentioned, Lima Bank, Southern Sun, my compatriot was Hakainde Hichilema. I'm not the one who appointed them. In the privatization scheme, the late Donald Benza decided that we were going to have Zambian advisors. And I don't think that was wrong. So when you take people to account, you take out the advisors. You can only be as good as your advisor. If my advisor tells me $6 million is okay, and the very next day he's chairman, look, there's no law which says you can't be chairman. But my question as a person sitting on the other side, so I still have questions as to whether that 6 million was a correct price. But was I wrong to trust a Zambian across the table? The answer is no. My instincts were that as Zambians must be able to serve Zambian interests. But if people serve their personal interests, you give them a project and say, restructure this project, then they share the houses. And there were many like that.
But if you ask somebody, say to
do you even get to know before you leave that they have got that asset? do they sell today? Do they sell today? Do they sell today? And the very next day they are moving to whatever Savo Road. Do they sell? We come to realize after the 2021. Oh, so that was their property. Hichilema. Oh, really? I mean, as minister, do you go to the detail and say, give me the spoon, give me that? No. You have staff, you have advisors, and sure, to be able to be effective, you have to have faith in your advisors. If they say the ministers are sleeping and therefore we steal, sure, they have said it in public domain that even young as they are, they could have been involved in criminalities which needs to be followed.
Now, for many stakeholders, when it comes to the mines, people feel they were undervalued, leading to the country not benefiting much. Maybe you can kind of explain to us how the value for these mines were determined and who participated in the process, and whether the mine we're talking about, Mr. Edith, was one of them, and what role did he play?
I think that I've mentioned what I have attached to him, and that is Ramcos. Okay? Ramcos is a mine in Mocha. It was under receivership after the Indian business owners left, and it was put under receivership. That I can firmly say, government appointed them to be receivers, and they have to give the account themselves. Now, when you say that the mines were undervalued, at the time when you are sitting at the table, there will be production models. And there were professionals from the mines. Some were dead, some were still alive. And they would tell you, I'm one of those few ministers who got out of my office to go and have a meeting in the mining offices in the Copper Belt. I want you to recall one incident when Anglo-American arrived in Zambia to put the entire mining sector under receivership. They came to our office. I was not aware, but the entire business community knew that that particular meeting, Anglo-American had arrived to put our country under receivership. I only got a call from the union that that's the agenda. And when I was sitting across the table, it was a very difficult meeting. And the Anglo-American team under Jack Holmes, they said to me, look, we are here as B shareholders to make a resolution that the mines must be under receivership. I told them that over my dead body would that happen. And I told them that if they had no use for the mines, they better walk away. And I told them that they had made their first dollar in this country, and under no circumstances were they going to put the mines under receivership. We had a meeting for the whole day, and I told them, I said, hey, listen, if you think that these mines are not worth anything, let us exchange. I had this nice way of, let us exchange. They are worth nothing, so take the $10 and walk away. That's your payment for your B shareholders. However, if you think that this country has a future in mining, let us sit down and put a joint team to do a technical assessment of the mines. That's how I forestalled that receivership. Every now and then, the foreigners take us for a ride. Secondly, I recall days when we couldn't pay workers in ZC because there was no money. That was the truth. There was no money. We had to borrow money from the commercial sector like Citibank to pay the workers. My first act as Minister of Finance was to borrow $50 million to spend on salaries for ZCCM. So whenever the World Bank was at the table, the issue was that the mines are worth nothing. Because the price at the time for copper was $2,000 to a ton. And the cost of running those mines was far much higher. That's how you see that all the models that came were predicting that the mines were going to run out in 15 to 20 years. We have had new explorations, there are new finds, even the old mines have had new life. I think we saw this week that one mine now has been given, instead of 15 years, it has bequeathed to itself through exploration an extra 30 years. There had never been any exploration up to that time, and the copper was falling. So it became an issue of saving the assets. What you can say is that how did the government give out all the shares to the private sector? For me, that has never been my model. That's why now when the Minister of Mines is saying we need to take more stake, my approach has always been government needs to have a stake in the mining sector. Because
so
you can see...
idea.
Yes, I mean, that's a correct thing.
But do we have the capacity and the money?
No, but we have the assets. I think that if you go to the history, you hear that I was one of those proponents that we adopt the Chilean model. The Chilean model is that government gets royalties, government also gets dividends from the mines. And that's what...
it has worked for them.
It has worked for them. I mean, at the time that they are saying the mines are not giving us money, they have 100%. But if we had shares, we would be able to get even 25%. If you look at the activities that I did myself, you find that I left at least 25% in some assets. And you need to understand that I was at Minister of Finance for 11 months.
Less than a year.
But I achieved quite a lot. I brought the international community back to the table. I put I restarted the privatization, and we moved on.
Now on the same issue of the mines, I mean, you alluded to this. ZCCM Investment Holdings announced it is seeking a controlling stake in Glencore's subsidiary Mopani Copper Mines. According to Mines Minister Richard Musugwa, do we have the capacity to manage that investment?
You know, to have a share, to be a shareholder, doesn't mean that you have to direct. We mix shareholding and direction. We can be shareholders and contract a management team to run our business. And I think that that model works. If you look at Botswana Power Company, when they were in trouble like we have been, they hired the Electricity Board of Ireland to manage the Botswana Power Company. They still held 100% shares. They put a manager to manage the company. So to have a controlling share doesn't require you to have capacity to mine. We can't be miners, but we can put a management team in place to manage our interest and be able to run the company. That's the way it's supposed to be run. Not all shareholders are managers.
Now, ZCM HI currently has about 10% shares, while Blanco has 71.3% shares and over 16% for the first quantum minerals. How feasible is it for ZCM IH to have a controlling share?
I think those are boardroom discussions. It is possible because if Grenco gives out shares and the others give out shares, it depends on what arrangements they make. You see, as Zambians, we need to have faith in ourselves. And I said, no, we don't have faith.
Not even a bit.
No, look, I mean, if Tanzania was behind us 30 years ago, and now they are ahead of us economically, then we must ask ourselves, we must go to an endeavor, not to talk about the economy, to talk about our lack of faith in ourselves. Because in us is deposited the ability to develop. We have land, we have air, we have water, and all we hear is doom and gloom. And that's why I think that this pandemic should give us a departure point, that it's equalizing. It didn't matter if you go to see Dr. Bongo in Congo, you can no longer go to see Dr. Bongo in Congo. We all have our UTH, we all have our Kito Central Hospital. We need to invest in ourselves. But the best investment that we can do for ourselves is to invest in self-confidence. Once we have self-confidence, there's no child who is down. If you tell a child you are down, you are down, you are poor, they will be poor. If you tell a child, marvelous, you can achieve, you failed this course, but I think that next time do a bit better. Look at what you've done here. That child will excel. We need a little bit of self-confidence, and maybe we need to have a meeting just discussing self-confidence. How do we get out of our abject poverty? How do we get out of our mistrust? How do we get out of all these things which inhibit creation of viable relationships and interaction and cross-pollination of ideas?
This is a hot seat right here on Hot Number 1 for news and entertainment, and of course,
to the country to be able to put food on the table. We depended on a number of people going to Nakonde border post, going to Kasumbalesa, and the restriction in the movement of peoples has caused a devastating impact on the family income. So now, which way forward? I noticed that we as a country need to plan for our 11th province, the Lubumbashi Kasumbalesa province. Because as I sit here, our brothers and sisters there, they're actually moving in the villages. You'll be amazed that even pigs, there's a critical shortage of pigs in Zambia. Now, this has arisen because of high cost of feed. Why high cost of feed? Last year we had a drought, there was shortage of food. Now, we keep on saying to our people, you are smuggling. No, we need to move to looking at that market as a golden opportunity. Instead of us exporting copper to London, let us say to our farmers, you can grow 10 tons of maize and sell 5 where you want. Or we do it different. You say each family should be self-sufficient with food. except for those of us who depend on milling maize. So that can be taken off by the millers. But in our rural areas, we need to say to our people, if you're a family of 10, can you keep at least 15 bags of food crop for yourselves? I don't want to say maize, because you can keep millet, cassava, or sorghum. And whatever extra you can sell to whoever you want. Look, I grow some maize. I have a few bags on my farm. I would really want to fetch a higher price, but I'm scared of loading the truck and going to Kasumbalesa because they'll say I'm smuggling. But no one tells the gold miner that they are smuggling. No one tells the beef farmer that they are smuggling. You find that our butcheries, they are selling at Kasumbalesa.
So for everything,
unimpeded. Yes. So our policies of not allowing our people to exploit their full potential is the reason why we sometimes have critical shortages of food crop. If we said to our commercial farmers, I mean, whoever controls wheat, where it goes, do you see people saying, no, don't sell your wheat? You see, you go around their center pivots for wheat because the people are saying maize is a political crop. Why is maize a political crop? Because it's a food crop. So now, how do we take away that tag from there? We need to stand up and say to our people, grow as much as you can, as long as you don't come back to government and say, feed us, you can sell where you want. Our brothers from the DRC, they are in the villages, buying beans, buying maize, picking up pigs and goats. So there is an open market which doesn't require the IMF and foreign exchange. So in our planning, let us take this opportunity and exploit it to the maximum. Did you ever think that our brothers from DRC could be in the villages looking for pigs? They actually pay cash on site of a pig. They even pay cash and say, I'm coming next month, I find it is growing to 50 kilos or 60 kilos. And there's a shortage of pigs. So there's an opportunity. And I think that when we talk about how do we get out of our current situation, agriculture is the solution. And decentralization is the art and backbone of that solution. I see that my sisters are in the villages giving out seed packs. Let these seed packs not be household food security. We need to move from household food security to household income security, where we say you can grow a hectare for your food and 2 or 3 hectares for cash. Once we do that, in 3-4 years' time, we don't need to go out there with cash transfers or with the food packs. But there's going to be a first step, and I'm saying that this step needs to be accelerated and increased. But let's not go to the same people year in, year out and say, here you are, here is a cash transfer, here you are, here is a seed for you to grow, to be food secure. Let us move our families, not in huge numbers. We can start with a minimum number of, say, 500,000 households. And say, for this minimum number of households, we want to have 1.5 million hectares of crop that they are growing. And we can achieve it. We can achieve it. But let us not limit our people to a lima of maize, a lima of cowpeas, a lima of beans. That will only be for consumption. Our people need clothing, they need education, they need medicine. All these require money. And we need to move our people to a position where we create wealth in their households. For me, that's my dream, and I think that that should be the vision for the country, that we can get people out of poverty, because our neighbors have done it here in Tanzania. They are doing well. You don't see stranded children. They eat well, they have fruit. They don't import tangerines from South Africa. We can grow because we have shores, we have lands which are good for these crops.
Now, you did talk about the stimulus packages that government has launched, and you alluded to the fact that they're not really enough. How else can government help its people during this pandemic?
Actually, the 10 million was more than enough. But the way it was applied is what has not created the result.
So
I think I was very clear, I'm very clear that it only went to existing bank customers, and it only went to secure the bank's positions, because some of those loans were becoming bad loans. So basically, if you owe the bank 2 kwacha, the bank goes to the central bank and collects that 2 kwacha, and comes to you and says, that 2 kwacha which you owe me, I'm just reducing the interest. But they've already been paid by the central bank. I don't see the logic myself. I would have accepted a situation where the central bank said, how much was your interest which you were expected to get from this loan? Here is a check for that. So the extra amount on lend to the customer. It would be the 5 million, a portion of that, say 2 million is interest. The bank maybe should have cleared the interest and then lend the others. But what the central bank has done is that if a client owes 10 million, the commercial bank goes and collects 10 million and only passes a portion of the interest to the customer as a relief for 5 years and says, this loan which you owe us, you pay us in 5 years. Meanwhile, they've already collected. So I don't see the mathematical logic in that. That stimulus has not gone to stimulate production or further investment in the economy. That's basically what the situation is. The argument from the bankers is that no, when we relieve the clients of interest, then more money is available to them for them, since they haven't paid us the interest, more money is available to them to invest. But the point is, the pandemic came at a certain time, closed the gates for production, closed the consumption, and so when you
so they can't have money without production.
There's no money. There is no money. There is no production. There's no money. We need to invest fresh cash in the economy. But the 10 million has been...
So the banks are being unfair then?
No, the banks have not been given correct advice by the central bank. That's what the central bank wants. The central bank wants to support commercial banks and not the investor in Zambia.
This is a hot seat, and soon we'll be opening the lines. Is the FDD participating in the upcoming parliamentary by-elections in Mwanza-Bombwe and Ukasha constituencies?
No, we are not participating. We have not been participating in any by-elections. We are of the view, and we have been of the considered view, that by-elections are a sheer waste of public resources. And that's why for some of us, we were really keen to have Bill 10, and there was talk that in the proposed amendments, there would be room for people not to go for by-elections. I mean, if you have a seat in Mwanza-Bombwe where there is a member of parliament from a certain party, wouldn't it be just ideal? We have 4 months to go, 5 months to go, to just say the party which lost the member there, give us another member. That way you save money. Look at the amount of money we are spending on these by-elections. And you go to the hospitals, we are lacking Panadol, we are lacking a lot of things. I know the Minister of Health is doing very well with the COVID, but I think that he also needs to put attention on the other sections of his departments, the cancer department, the pediatrics, the mothers. All these departments are lacking provisions. Now, the amount of money we spend in a by-election, I think that we could easily put up a new hostel at the University of Zambia. So we are not participating, and I hope that we can come to an agreement as a nation that by-elections are expensive. And we've been talking about this. Unfortunately, the nature of our politics, we talk. When Edith Nawakwi is the president, it will be Edith Nawakwi is corrupt. When someone else is president, that one is gone. You see, this word corruption is like the only campaign theme we have in this country. So we don't campaign on what are the new ideas that can put our country forward. When you listen to us politicians, it's just about each other. No one sits in the arena talking about how a new idea can change the face of this republic forever. As politicians, maybe it's time that we get a cadre of politicians who can talk about ideas of how to develop our undeveloped areas, how to put food on the table, how to create wealth in households. And unless we do that, another 50 years will be, we'll get to a millennium and we'll still be talking about where are we going for our health, where are we going for our education.
It's time for us to open the lines. The number to call 0974-870-877. This is the hot seat right here on Hot Number One with news and entertainment.
To the hot seat on Hot FM 87.7. It's time for you to call now and get involved. Call now and get involved.
We're also live on Kwitu FM 93.3. Let's take in some calls. Hello, good morning. Thank you so much for coming through. Who's calling us?
Good morning, sir. What's your name?
You didn't tell us your name, my brother. Eh? Ooh, I didn't hear your name.
Chanda.
Chanda who?
Hello? Chanda Kangwa.
Yes, go ahead, Bakangwa. Please go ahead.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think for me, Madam Nawakwi,
Maybe there's a lot of wind blowing into your phone. If you can move a little bit. Yes.
come up so well concerning privatization. We now know where NGH, what happened to privatization. Especially when you talk of how people road, how he bought that house, people road. Because I remember very well, we were telling him to sit in Canaan when he was not even in Canaan, he was waiting for him back. So to me, I know now that HH reports as Zambia, and he needs to answer for that. And there's no way we can vote for somebody who has got double dealing from the other side, and again, dealing with government, double standard. How can we allow somebody like that to become a president? So, Madam President Nawakwi, I'm very happy the way you've come up. We now know the truth about HH. There's no way we can vote for somebody as a president with the just hearing. Very big about.
We're taking the calls 0974-870-877. This is the hot seat. You can call us. Thank you for coming through. Hello, good morning.
Good morning, please. How are you?
Fine, thanks. Who's calling us?
Excellent. This is Alex Matila.
Go ahead, Mr.
I'm appreciating the points that have been raised actually by Honorable Nawakwi. I found her to be a very credible leader throughout my lifetime. One thing I want to stress out to sure is that, truthfully speaking, at the